Today I'm going to show you how to do a 50-point check, or some called a seasonal check, where you prepare a car for the winter or prepare a car for the summer. But there's quite a few points to check, and we use our own sheet at GSS Auto. It says 50-point check. This one says winter, so we're going into the winter, and it's kept over in the file cabinet on by my office door. The one thing I will say about doing 50-point check is if you put a check mark in any of these boxes, you have to be 100% sure it's okay. You can leave it blank, and that's okay too. Then we know to focus in on that in a later class. Do not check anything unless you're 100% sure. Well, we're going to start with lights, and the headlights, high and low beam, and you can have a partner when you do this, and they can turn the lights on. You don't need an end to turn the lights on, you just need an end when you have to turn the ignition on. So we see that the headlights are good here, and they're good brightness. Then we can look at the park lights. This is the left front of the vehicle, and there's a park light on the side here, but there could be park lights down lower depending on the vehicle. Now you would give them a check mark or an X depending on whether they're working or not. So we're going to walk around to the back, and we can see the tail lights. And there's a license plate light on that sheet, and in fact this one is not working, but we can see the left and right tail lights are working, so that's good. We check them off. Now remember what you're doing here. You are checking the lights for the safety of the vehicle and the safety of the driver and passengers. If they don't have brake lights, they could be in an accident. So we look here, we put the brake lights on, and you can see the right shining quite brightly, and then the middle brake light at the top is on. That's obvious. But actually in this vehicle, the left brake light was out, so that has to be repaired. So we found a couple things so far, and that's the license plate lights and the left brake light out. When you have to check the signal lights, it's a little more complicated because the ignition has to be on. So I'm going to show you how to do this next. To check signals, you need to have your N, because in many imports, well, most vehicles, you have to have the key in the on position. Engine off, ignition on. And to be able to even touch the ignition key in a car, you have to have your N. And if you do have your N and you're going to touch the ignition or change it to a position or whatever, you must make sure everybody around you knows, and you make sure there's nobody in front. We want to check the signals. It's the only way we can do it. So I can see the front are working fine, and if you can see, the rear are illuminating against the door. I know the signals are working. If I go back and look at them, I see that they're very bright. So that's the left signal. I'll reach in the open window, because all the windows should be open if they're in the shop, and I can see the illumination on the door there. But to be honest with you, we should make sure it's not a dim flash. And go to the back, or if you work with a partner, it would be much easier. And I see that is flashing also properly. That's how you check signals. Well, now we finished the lights, or the major lights that the driver can't see. It's time to have a look under the hood. Looks a little complicated, doesn't it? But we'll focus on one thing at a time. First up is the brake fluid, and remember in our study so far that brake fluid is ultra important, that if fluid is to be added, it has to be the correct fluid. Well, in the case of a 50-point check, it gets reported to me if it's low, and this one is a little low. It's below the maximum, and when we're doing a 50-point check, it's usually in conjunction with a service. Everything should be at the maximum. So if you see this kind of condition, you've got to let the instructor know, or let me know, and we'll make sure that you add the right fluid under supervision. This is the master cylinder, and you saw it in the previous diagram. The master cylinder is not always transparent like this. We can see right through this one. Sometimes you have to take the cap off, and when you run into that, again, you have to see the instructor and get proper instruction on that. The rule of thumb on those type of reservoirs for the master cylinder, the brake fluid, is 1/4 inch from the top of the reservoir. There's a couple more notes here to identify the master cylinder, which is when you push the pedal down in the brake, it applies to the master cylinder, and it's always ahead of a kind of a round thing, and just behind that yellow cap you can see kind of a round mechanism, and that's the power booster. And we're looking at the left side of the vehicle, and just above at the top of the pictures the windshield and the driver or the steering wheel behind that. So that's where they are 99% of the time located. I've kept this picture to look at the power steering fluid reservoir, and it's ahead of the master cylinder, not below it. That's another thing, but ahead of it in the kitty corner of the picture. That is the power steering fluid reservoir, and that of course needs special fluid too, and there's specifications for that fluid. And you can see here a close-up shot of it. It should be about half full. Sometimes they have a dipstick and sometimes they don't. You just look in, they should be half full, and that's because if you turn one way they go down in reservoir capacity, or not capacity, and reservoir level, and you turn the opposite way they go up. So straight ahead, and that's where the wheels will be on the hoist, it should be about halfway. Any of these fluids are down, you always consult the instructor, or make a note of it on the 50-point check sheet. Then you're resolved of any kind of responsibility of discovering something that's wrong with the vehicle. The engine oil, and you should be pretty well versed with that with the oil change video. You can see the engine oil dipstick, it's yellow, it's just below the master cylinder again, and it's you can just see a little yellow handle there, and that's the dipstick, so we're going to pull that out. So we wiped the gauge, it's actually called a gauge, and dipped it back in all the way down, and then we see it comes up, and it's down a little over a liter. You see the hash marks, and they go up to a high line, and anyway it's below the low line. So this engine, if it was a 4-liter capacity, would have a little under 3 liters in it, and it should get a liter of oil. Remember, all these level problems are just noted on the 50-point check sheet and turned into the instructor. And then after the check has been done, then we'll set a plan in to bring the levels properly before the vehicle goes out. Well, we want to check the coolant, and there's actually 3 things. There's the color of the coolant, there's when it will freeze, and the level. And they all have to be looked at when we look at the coolant. And here you can see the radiator, it's got a the cap in the yellow again, and we're going to take that off. Of course, we're going to make sure that the engine is cold. Under no circumstances take that cap off unless the engine is cold. If it's warm, have the instructor check it. You could end up with severe burns if you take the radiator cap off when the engine's hot, because it's under pressure and it'll come out as superheated steam and burn you badly. So make sure the engine is cold, or get the instructor to check it. Once the radiator cap is off, there's a rubber seal there that is crucial that it's in good shape, or there would be a problem for the customer. You can see it's a round rubber seal, and it deteriorates quite often, so you have a look at that, and then you look into the radiator. It should be full, maybe down a 1/4 inch, but no more. And so you've now checked level and actually checked the radiator cap itself. If you see anything wrong with it, show the instructor and mark it down on the sheet. We're going to obtain the antifreeze tester to decide how much antifreeze is in the vehicle. And it's over by my office in the shelves. You can see it here. It's got some numbers on it. The blue is Fahrenheit and the red is centigrade. And we're going to fill it with coolant, checking the color and noting if it's cloudy. And we see here this is minus 23 centigrade or minus 10 Fahrenheit, which is acceptable in Vancouver. If it was in Edmonton or whatever, I'd probably want to get it up to minus 35 centigrade. Once all the tests have been done and noted, we're going to put the radiator cap back on and actually have the instructor check it. It has to go on completely or else it'll fail. So you make sure you twist it on so that the tangs on the side of the cap touch the stops on the radiator, and let me check it and then put the antifreeze tester away. Now, checking fan belts or serpentine belts, this is a serpentine belt style. It is very dangerous. If you go anywhere near a rotating part of an engine, like the fan belt or the fan itself or any of the pulleys, you have to look into the driver's seat and make sure nobody's in there. Because if anybody's doing another operation and is turning the key to check the signals or whatever, and the engine turns over accidentally, you can lose a finger. So before you do it, you check the belt. And you're checking for cracks in the ribs and whatnot. But experience will help you with this one. They get old and they get hard. And there will be examples of belts that are no good for service in the shop from time to time, and I'll show you. You're going to see two rather low-level containers or reservoirs. This one's for windshield washer fluid, and from time to time, if we're doing other work on a vehicle, I'll fill this up for the customer. But we should check it and make note. And the other's for coolant, and it'll have lines on it. It should be about half full too, because that's the expansion tank, and the coolant that expands goes into that tank to be drawn back into the radiator level later when the coolant cools and contracts. And it'll draw the fluid back in from this container.